Thanks, Ailey. I think that the first thing to do is to set the kind of scene for this, because given the UK general election result, we've got a big problem in our hands, because the UK government is now committed and able to implement substantial savings across the whole of the public sector. So there are four problems here. One's the UK government. The other is the Scottish government, because the money comes in a block grant to the Scottish government and we don't know how they'll distribute it. So it could be that local authorities aren't as badly affected as they might think, but they could be worse, because the Scottish government might decide, for example, to put more money into the health service, arguably. So we've got the UK government, we don't know how much they're going to cut, but we've got a good idea. We've got the Scottish government, and then we've got the real problem, which is COSLA. Because the government allows COSLA, namely the local authorities, to decide much of the distribution themselves. Now, I could never get my head around this, but it's one of the reasons why Argyll and Bute is particularly badly hit, because COSLA will not countenance more money for an islands authority, which is what Argyll and Bute ought to actually get. So the other island councils do get more of the share, but then we are hit with the biggest problem of the lot, which is the population's declining, and the rest of the population of Scotland's increasing. So if you've got a smaller overall pot, and it's got to be distributed roughly in population, then we're going to come out of this very badly indeed. The problem is we don't know how badly. But the headline kind of numbers for you are that at the moment the council has a budget of about £244 million a year. And what they're saying is that they think that over the next 4 years about 37 million will come off that, which is pretty huge. But it gets a wee bit worse, I'm afraid, because there's a good chunk of the council budget you can't actually reduce easily. So for example, if they've got long-term loans for various things, then they're pretty much fixed. What we pay for the private finance initiative schools is fixed. So that all these fixed things aren't easily moved. So the difficulty then is that the balance of the budget, whatever that is, but let's call it roughly a couple of hundred million, is likely to get 37 million taken off it. So this is really quite serious. Now, we've known about this, the potential for this, for a number of years. And the truth of the matter is that in the last budget and in this current one, the council took the easy route and only trimmed the budget, whereas it might have been sensible to try and take a bit more off so that there wasn't a big drop next year, because the problem starts in April 16, next April. Now, the budget process, the way the council works is that normally the budget is set in February of the year, and in April this year the Policy and Resources Committee got a paper which was presumably drawn together by the council staff and Dick Walsh, and I don't know if there were any other councillors involved, but he's the policy lead for finance, and they produced a paper that was the kind of starting point for the budget cuts. And what they did was they cut off £52 million out of the budget and said that can't be touched, but didn't tell us what was in it. So after a few questions, it turns out that there are big chunks of it that aren't easily touched, like the loans and so forth. But one of the things that they had managed to hide in there was the £1.5 million it cost for the councillors every year, and that had been hidden from sight. And there's 2 or 3 other things too that you might actually look at within that 50 million. But they then went on to have a go at trying to identify what would be protected from cuts, where you would increase your spend, and what you would cut. So the long and the short of it is that they're looking to take about 11 to 12 million pounds out of the budget from April 2016, and it will continue like that for probably 4 to 5 years. It's hard to know exactly, but it probably will be something like 12 million next year, 13 million the year after, 9 the year after, then 3, then a much smaller amount. And that's assuming all the don't knows that we said at the start come to pass, which is that the UK government chops the money that comes to Scotland, that the Scottish government doesn't cut it overly for the councils, and that COSLA don't change the distribution method. But our problem remains the lack of population and the declining share of Scotland's population. So we've got a real issue, I think. But the reason that this meeting has come about, I think, is because Dick Walsh, in his wisdom at that Policy and Resources Committee meeting, got them to agree to set up something that he called a project board to look at the budget. And I started to ask questions about it, and I've still not got the answers to all of them. But what I do know is that it meets in secret. There are no papers issued to the other councillors. There are no minutes produced. And therefore what is happening is limited to Walsh and the other 11 councillors who are there. Now, I'm pretty sure it's on the dodgy side of being legal. If it's there at all, it might actually be illegal, but they have yesterday explained that there is a legal way of doing this, but I'm still not so sure. So, as much as anything else, the process that we've got here is almost unheard of anywhere else in Scotland. I don't know of another council that would do and operate this way. And
whose
what
idea is that, by the way? Whose idea is that to do?
Dick Walsh's. He proposed at the meeting, because I was at it, that they set up this project board, and I didn't know at the time.
Nobody else knows about it.
Well, they know about it, but what wasn't clear until I started to ask questions was that it's on the fringes of the council's constitution, and it doesn't have to adhere to the normal rules about holding meetings in public, about publishing papers before the meetings start, about taking a minute that becomes public. But I'm told that it's legal. Right, so we've got a big problem, but we've got another problem because of the way it's been handled. That's really the issue. My view, and I said it several times over several months, was what we should be doing probably is having a monthly seminar for all elected members, and that members of the public could come to, where we can look at all the options here and try and see if you can reach some kind of consensus. There is no doubt that councils are going to be faced with hard choices, but at least if the process is done openly and everybody starts to understand what's going on and people can influence what choices are made, then the process becomes fairer. At the moment, it isn't fair. Now, I do think that he's started to feel the heat a wee bit here, because this afternoon, out of the blue, they called a seminar for 2 weeks on Friday. Now, council, they run seminars for councillors normally on the first Monday of every month, and Monday the 1st of June was in my diary. All of a sudden, they've changed the date. Vivian Dan said to me this afternoon that she thinks the date was changed deliberately to a Friday because nobody ever expects council meetings to be on a Friday. The only meetings that ever occur on a Friday are planning ones occasionally, I think, Gordon. But there's nothing else. They're normally Monday to Thursday. So her cynical view, and she's maybe right, is that it's been put on a Friday to minimise the attendance, but to make it look as though there's some attempt to allay the criticism that is coming his way.
Is the public allowed to attend this seminar?
No. No.
Will you be attending?
Well, I've actually got half a dozen things that I'm doing that day
Right.
on a completely different bit of business in Oban, nothing to do with the council. And I've arranged several things, so I'm hoping that maybe they'll find a way of bringing it back to the Monday.
Why is it not open to the public? Why can we not go and say, listen, who told you you were in charge?
They are our councillors.
That's true, but the seminars have never been open to anybody other than the councillors, and even then there isn't a great attendance at a lot of them.
If they're dealing with us, surely the local people can say, can have a voice to be able to say, if they're dealing with a local issue, surely local people can put themselves forward and say, I disagree, or I agree, or...
Well, I don't disagree with you, but on the other hand, it would be very hard to handle that if everybody, or even Komori doesn't hold a lot of people. You know, you could only get about 25 or 30 members of the public in, and that's about it. So if it had been done in a much more open way and papers published so that people can read them, you still have the seminars and you document what you've kind of agreed as you go along, then at least people have got an opportunity to comment on it.
I suppose my concern is there a plan for community engagement around the service choices? So if it's not as part of this seminar that you're talking about, will it be planned in for the next 2 to 3 months that people will actually, whether it's local surgeries or...
Gordon,
Yeah, well, I'm actually on the group. The SNP group decided it would participate because basically because you're in a minority, and if you remember back 3 years what happened, councillors here, Mike Bresnan and myself, stood up for the old folk in Struan Lodge, and as a result of that, and I was interested to see the email coming in from Mr McCormick over in Helensburgh suggesting Mr Robb, the councillor in Helensburgh, would become involved in the discussions and dialogue. Now, if you remember Queen's Hall, before they were attempting to close Struan Lodge, Mr Robb made a contribution to the public meeting. So, and that's the democratic process, that's the process we're in. As far as the SNP group, we took the decision that we're better actually sitting around the table, as far as possible, sit around the table and be part of that, the deliberation of as to where the cutbacks. Mike was right with regard to the figures and the approach we had when we came into administration as an SNP administration 3 years ago was that we would take some chunks out, slightly bigger chunks of budget deficit over a longer period. In fact, it's almost replicating, you know, what Nicola Sturgeon was talking about, the austerity, spreading the austerity. Basically, if you owe the bank, well, another 2 years onto your debt to the bank is not going to make much difference. It won't make much difference to the bank, and it might actually help reduce your outlays over that longer period of time. You still need to pay your debt, but it's the same basic principles. We all run houses, we all know what the circumstances are in getting through the monthly bills, so we know that. The council's no different. The cumulative total, the worst case was a 37.5 million. The best was 28.1 million by 2020 to 21. So the SNP group decided, do we just say, tell them to get lost, we're not going to participate? Or do we actually say, well, okay, we will participate, but we'll set down the ground rules in which we are going to participate, and we have already done that. Consultation is one of the things that we have to make sure in an open and transparent way, as you've heard me say before. And of course, just before I left the house, I checked my email and I've got the invitation to the next board meeting, and it's emblazoned across the front of it, confidential. Right. So I'll raise that with my group leader tomorrow. In that, I don't think there's anything confidential about it. It should be open for debate and discussion. And in fact, as a councillor, and Mike's the same, we'd be coming back to you because you're always well, you're all sensible. I only say reasonably sensible. You're all. I'm saying that about myself. I'm sensible folk. You know that you might decide to we'll keep a swimming pool, or do we keep an old folks' home?
Yeah.
You know, those are the kind of decisions. That's the kind of dialogue that we have to make with the people we represent. And as an SNP group, that's what we decided we could do. If they don't adhere, or they do some of the shenanigans that folk are suspecting they might get up to, the SNP group are quite clear. We will walk away from the discussions. You know, but we've still to represent the vulnerable in our society. And if we're not at the table to do that, and that table should actually be as large as possible in our view, because we want to have total engagement with our communities. We know the austerity that we're about 12 billion, I think Mr Cameron's got up his sleeve to hit us with in Scotland. We know that's going to have a ripple effect further down the line, and we're at the end. In fact, we're not. The more vulnerable in our community are at the end of the line. So that's the view the SNP group have taken. That's the view we're going to move forward. There are issues, and we're not moving forward with our eyes shut. We are well aware of the history of how the council operates. But certainly as an SNP group, that's the stance we're taking at this point in time, and it can evolve over the next couple of weeks and months.
So will councillors be coming back to their communities then, and they saying, you know, this is what we're doing, this is, you know, I think there needs to be
It
that
should
sort
be
of
part, well,
mechanism.
you were at the community planning partnership, it has to come to the lowest denomination with regard to the bureaucracy within the council. And I would think that...
Should Walsh not be challenged as to why there's such a...
Sorry?
Should Walsh not be challenged as to why there's no transparency?
Absolutely.
Well, it's only the process. I've only been to one meeting, you know. So the next meeting, I think, is 24th, which is the one I get the paperwork for. So the next.
Surely council there should be no lack of transparency on that. It's, you know,
No, I don't have any. I don't have any problem with transparency. We're there to represent the people. Okay.
I'm talking about what's going on with Walsh.
Yeah, well, we will take them to task on that. And other councils already. Vivian's already been emailing Mike as well with regard to taking them to task on the openness and transparency. It has to go across the board, all councillors, because all councillors are going to be affected. And again, going back to what happened here 3 years ago with Struan Lodge, if they'd actually had the gumption to give us the 9 months that we asked for, we could have reassessed Struan Lodge, we could have moved things on in a slightly different way if we had been given the time to do it, but we weren't, and that's the game that's played in a sense. But we're keen as an SNP group to make it as open and transparent as possible.
Gordon, you'd have to be awful sure that this is not seen as collusion. If you know what I mean, you'd have to make sure that the press was aware that you were in there to, in fact, look at things and you weren't colluding with this. That has to go out into the general public.
I was concerned about it, and I've raised that with the group leader, and we've come up with a budget deficit service choices document, which is basically outlining what we should be making folk aware of, more or less what Mike's saying, but also from an SNP group. We don't want to be seen in collusion with an administration. And when folk criticise the council, they're actually criticising Mike and I as well, because we're in the council. We have to be quite clear it's the administration of the council, you know, and we've got to do our bit to hold them to task on your behalf.
Would there be a difference if we're talking about Dick Walsh here and how he kind of keeps things private? Would there be a huge difference, or would there be any kind of difference if the SNP get in? If someone from the SNP get in, would that be open as someone already said? Would it be, you know, open
Well,
and allow us to understand what's going on?
No. Simple answer, no. You'd need to have 20 councillors probably leave the council tomorrow morning to have any chance of getting different people elected. It won't happen. No, well, no, to be fair, it's 2 years to the election, and that's when it'll take place. Marai was trying to get in.
The question was, if the SNP was in power, would it be different? And the answer is clearly yes. We wouldn't be having this meeting at the moment.
Well, you might.
No, we might
You
still
might
have
very
that.
well.
No.
No.
But the answer to your question, would it be different? You would people would be more included? And that was your question.
Yeah, well, pretty much,
They would be more included,
That's
but
all.
what I'm saying is that we're in a situation where for 2 years there's not going to be any likely to be any change. The SNP group's got 9 members out of 36 councillors, so it can't do much other than
Well-
complain about what's happening.
We're impotent. In fact, those in opposition are impotent in this council, and it may well sit that way for the next 2 years. There's not a lot we can do. However, freedom
You
of
seek legal advice, but you're saying, you know,
Free-
it's what Rick Walsh is doing is in the boundary of being possibly illegal. So, can you not change that particular avenue?
sorry.
Can we let Mariah in? She's been trying to ask.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can get, all in the very short term, it's really what we're talking about. We want information coming our way. Maybe we should get much better as electors to help our councillors, all of them, regardless of party or whatever, to be accountable to us and use the Freedom of Information Act and say, you know, you have to tell us, and then they can go back to Dick Ward and say, I'm sorry, but confidentiality is just not on the cards because we're being challenged in our job. So, in a sense, we have to get better at it as well than we have been maybe so far. And in that way, help our elected representatives to do their job.
Can I just say on freedom of information, I've sent off today to the Commissioner a request for a review of a freedom of information request that I submitted a way back on the 5th of March. So the freedom of information is quite a useful tool. There are restrictions, there are some things which they can't respond to, and that's obvious for contracts and things like that. you know.
Sure.
But for general business as usual. But however, with regard to the
Budget, certainly.
then that certainly, as part of the consultation, we should have a sort of vibrant consultation process. That's what it's about with regard to getting feedback, because ultimately it's your money we're not going to be spending.
It should
Do
come
you know what I
from
mean?
us.
And the cutbacks that are coming through, okay, from Westminster, knock on to the Scottish Government, knock on via COSLA to the local authority. That's us down here. So,
To go back to the questions from round the corner though, what has been done is that I have written to, the council's got 2 committees that are chaired by people who are not councillors. The Audit Committee and Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee.
who puts them in charge?
Well, I don't know how this came about, but I suspect there were advertised things, and there's a guy called Martin Caldwell who's an accountant from Mull who chairs audit, and Ian Ross, who lives in Dunoon, chairs the Performance Review and Scrutiny. Now, I've written to both of them asking that they take this issue up, because no matter whether it's legal or not, it's wrong. You know, there's a big difference between things being legal and things being right. And this isn't right by any means because of the secret way that it's being done. So it also flies in the face of what Audit Scotland has said about the council on a number of occasions over the past 3 or 4 years, which is that there isn't enough scrutiny, that elected members don't scrutinise and take action on things that are going on. So I've asked both of them to consider this, and I've asked them ideally to have a joint meeting of audit and performance review and scrutiny, because this is not right. And if they refuse to do it, then in fact it will probably go to Audit Scotland anyway, although I don't have really a lot of hope that they'll do much.
How long is that going to take?
Well, it may not take all that long, but this is urgent, because this process, it isn't a long time till February, and that's when the final decision's made in the budget. I'm going to ask something earlier.
Yeah, was it not a fact that a few weeks ago the council decided to give themselves a pay rise,
Yes.
knowing that all this is going
Yes.
to happen?
Yeah.
And how can they?
Well,
When they are supposed to be working for us, we've elected them. They know what is coming, and yet they give themselves a pay
Precisely.
rise.
That's probably why they gave themselves a pay
Because
rise.
they know
But
who's
that-
But it's when they might be allowed to. But we
That
don't
cannot
tell
be
them
right.
that.
Well, this
We are taking on our rights by not doing that.
well, you're absolutely right. This is just
if they do
bizarre.
that, how can we
Right.
trust them with anything else?
When this came up on the 2nd of April, and I discovered the night before that they'd hidden away the £1.5 million or something that's spent in councillors, in this 50 million that wasn't to be part of the cuts.
How many councillors?
made-
1.5 million?
About 1.5 million, I think it's
How many councillors? That's what I'm
there's
asking.
36.
And that was a pay rise of 1.5 million.
No,
or
no,
that's
the budget
what
is
they
one and a
paid.
half, 1.5 million, round figures. But basically, I said, and I made it very clear at that meeting on the 2nd of April, if you're going to start taking big chunks out of the budget, you need to be fair about it. You need to take big chunks out of what councillors cost. It's as simple as that. And it's actually easy to do. You wouldn't believe how simple it would be to do it. And I'd like to come to that later just to see what people's views are. But let me tell you some of the things that they're proposing at the moment to
Mike,
take money
sorry,
up.
before you go further, what else is ring fenced?
Well, a lot of it is loan charges and the costs that are paid under these private finance agreements for all the new schools that were built. What else is in there, Gordon? Can you remember?
Well, for example, teacher salaries and things. I mean,
No, that's not in the 50 million.
no, but that's out with. I
Yeah.
mean, things like that are not going to be touched. You know what I mean with regard to there's aspects social care, some of the social care. So there's range of it, of items which are going to be ring fenced.
So what comes under social care then?
Well, I don't care.
So you couldn't really choose between a swimming pool or a care
I was
home?
just using that as an example
Alright,
of the
okay.
extremes. But who knows? And well, who knows what's going to happen with regard to the levels of.
No, but if the
of
care
cuts.
situation's ring fenced, is that
But-
we won't
But
have
it's
that?
not. It's
Oh,
not.
No, on
That's the area where they're proposing to take the biggest single chunk of money.
you're talking
The
about
pay, the
statutory
councillor's pay
care.
isn't ring fenced.
Statutory
should be.
services are ring fenced.
No, not even statutory services are ring fenced in this. They're proposing to take £9 million out of the adult care budget over the next 3 or 4 years. It takes the single biggest hit of any budget.
Whose
And-
ideas are that?
People who elderly who are cared at home, and that's the council's responsibility, although it will become a joint responsibility with the NHS very soon. So the view is that this is a cynical way of taking an easy cut out of the budget before you give it over to the NHS.
So whose idea is that?
Well, that's what came out in this first hit from
That
Walsh
committee.
and his officers. So, you know, some of the things are big because, I'll give you an example. See, the Scottish Government's made it difficult as well because they've said that we can't touch teacher numbers.
That's right.
And they've made that public. So if that's got to be maintained, then the rest of the budget takes a huge hit. So things like the non-teaching staff in a school,
Special needs, the
Yeah.
assistants.
they'll probably see, at the moment they're looking at a 20% cut. So that's very significant.
Surely that's when you're bringing up the children, they're going to be less educated than what they should be.
But it's the children with special needs that's going to be
Not
the
necessarily,
Yeah,
I mean,
they've
with
already got
children
to
with
the
special
bone.
needs and
Right,
other
yes.
children as well, surely if you're not allowed to,
Aye.
if they're taking 20% away from assistants and different things like that, surely that's going to make a difference to the education of our children.
Yes, but you know, it's not just that. It's not just that. If you take 20% off the adult care budget, you might as well not have it at all because it's already very poor,
Yeah.
in my view. It's not properly done, and we're paying people starvation wages
Yeah.
to do it via the private care companies that are operating here. So none of this is going to be simple.
But you have to come back to the point that it's the Tory government that are introducing these cuts.
Yep.
And it comes down the line from them. It's not invented by the Scottish government.
No.
It's not invented even by the council. It's coming from the Tory government austerity cuts,
Yeah.
which most of us here support parties that are against the austerity cuts on the scale that we're talking about. So as long as we remember that we're not in control of these cuts, and then we're talking about how the procedure is gone about and how we can minimise its effect on the community.
That's why we got the 56 down the road then, because that's surely they're going to kick up heebie-jeebies and say, no, we
It all
want
takes
to
time.
control all our money.
Yes.
There won't be a magic wand which will allow that to happen within the next 2 to 3 years. And so when you're talking to your next door neighbour, or you're talking to your pals on the bus who all voted no, I'll just remind them of that, because 9 months
That's what
ago, 10 months
independence
ago,
is about, Robert.
9 or 10
If
months
we had
ago, I
got
was
independence,
reminding,
we wouldn't be sitting here.
I was
I
reminding the
think we would
community,
still have to-
I was reminding the community
Yeah.
councils
The Tories
what the
are doing it,
implications
and
would
we've
be
got to deal with
with
it.
regard to the austerity. So they needn't think round in Kilmun or or elsewhere within Kill that this is new to them. You know, they've been advised, and there may well be things that we could maybe improve upon by more efficiency. But local government has been through that hoop how many times, and anybody that's working in local government or the housing associations or whatever, you've been reorganised so many times. There's not a lot left to reorganise.
Well,
But it's-
I'm not so sure, Gordon. I actually think Argyll and Bute, when you're hit with budget cuts like this, every organisation's got waste. There's not a single one's not got waste. Small businesses up to big multinationals, they're all got big chunks of waste hidden away. You don't do what Walsh is proposing, which is to identify things and just chop 20% off them. He said in his paper that this isn't salami slicing. No, it's not. He's got the bloody bread slicer out now. This isn't.
It's
this isn't-
amputation.
So, but there is a pile of waste in Argyll and Bute.
And save the money.
Now, my view, and not everybody will agree with this, but the fundamental problem with Argyll and Bute is that it's too big geographically. It's got areas that don't have common interests with other areas, and there needs to be a way of splitting it up into more manageable chunks and taking away the centre that's currently Kilmorey, because it's very expensive and everybody's travelling up and down the road big time. Now, I had a wee look, my travel expenses last year, and we share cars. I pick up Gordon, pick up Isabel and Robert from Bute as often as we can. We are the exception, I'll tell you. They're not the rule, I can assure you of that. But notwithstanding that, 65% of all the miles that I claimed for were up and down the road to Kilmorey. My guess is that if you look at the staff in the council, about 40% of their total costs are up and down from Kilmorey to Dunoon and to Oban and all the rest of it. If you stopped that and you ran it on a more localised basis, you'd save £1 million. That's how much is involved. £1 million.
I mean,
Right.
I agree with all that, but I think even that is a drop in the ocean. I mean, the problem what we're facing at the moment, that there is no mechanism, or if there's one, we as voters are not using it, is to open up channels of communication with the council. And also the council have very poor relationships with central government as well. It's very poor in making the case for Argyll and Bute. Central government is sick to the back teeth with Argyll coming with what they call the begging bowl, because the arguments have never been competently and intelligently and what the point is, we've put these guys there, and some of the women. So, I mean, you can't keep complaining about that sort of thing, but maybe as from now, we can at least, through our councils, begin to say, right, we've had enough. Between now and 2 years' time, we want to know what you're going to do. We want at least to know. And unless you know, you cannot negotiate on nothing. Or you can only moan, well, we've done that all our lives.
Because it seems like it's broken. The trust is gone, especially after with Castle Tower, the shenanigans that went on there. So there's no trust. Then finding about the pay they're giving themselves. I mean, it's just you're hearing
It's not
this.
a recent thing, really. I used to work for them 10 years ago and people moaned their heads off about the same lot. This has
Right,
been going
So
on
we
for
need
the
to get them out then, don't
But
we?
now with
When it comes to
technology
the elections then
before,
I think we should all be out in force.
Years ago we didn't know
And
all
helping the
this
council,
stuff.
sorry,
We weren't
because we
hearing it.
never
Now we're
asked.
seeing it.
We didn't ask. We put them there and that was it, get on with it.
Well, that's
Yeah.
true, and you know, the truth of the matter is that when the council does consult on things, precious few people ever respond,
Absolutely.
you know.
9 plus a few.
But at the same time, this secret operation that they've got in this is just, to me, completely unacceptable.
Absolutely.
So, somebody said use Freedom of Information Act. You could do that, but I'm not even convinced it would necessarily be productive, and it might take a long time. But one of the things that you could do, if you wanted, is actually to start petitioning the council
Yeah.
Is it
to
us kicking up
change
the
it.
proverbial
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah,
allowing
Sandy.
no disrespect one
Yeah.
person
Absolutely.
to deal with it? Is
Yeah.
it us?
Mate, isn't there a, like, they've got this project board or group going, can't the councillors that aren't involved in that get together and form an alternative budget? They've got until February to work this out and really, so is it the,
And
what,
put
you know,
it to
and
a
you're still going to
public
work
vote.
over the same
Yeah.
cuts, but at least you'll look at the less, the ones that are going to be less affected.
Well, first of all, Walsh has got pretty much complete control over the members of his administration. That leaves 13 councillors. There's the 9 in the SNP group, there's me, Vivian Dance, Bruce
Sorry.
Marshall and Neil McIntyre in Oban, who probably wouldn't cooperate with us because he's a one-man band Labour Party member.
You might
But-
now.
He might now, he might, I mean, Neil would be worth asking. And in fact, on my day in Oban on the 5th of June, one of the people I was going to try and catch up with was Neil McIntyre, a blether. But there would only be 13 of us. But for that to work, I think the SNP group would need to, well, they'd need to agree as a group they would do it. But we could do that.
Well,
I mean, you still get
there are-
access, hang
there
on,
are real difficulties.
you would still have the access to, well, within the administration, not the administration, but within the officers, to get the information from, i.e. the finance or the
That
department.
would be
or
the
whatever.
difficulty.
Well,
You might not get it.
That's
But you
what I
would
was
under
going
the,
to say.
under the
Difficult.
freedom of information, if somebody, if anybody applies for the
Officers
freedom
can't
of
refuse.
Yeah, but a councillor shouldn't have to go through the freedom of information.
No, I know
You should
that,
be
I'm
able to go
agreeing
straight
with
in
you,
there
but I
and-
mean, that even that should stop them from moving forward, if they can get them through if they can apply for the freedom of, the papers under the Freedom of Information Act.
The difficulty with freedom of information is that in Argyll and Bute, because it is the secret society, officers quite often say to people when they inquire about something, I'm going to treat this as a freedom of information request. The reason they do it is twofold. One is to delay answering, and the second is to restrict what they give you, because the freedom of information legislation legitimately allows certain things not to be, and I've had it done to me as a councillor. They've said to me, we'll treat that as an FOI request. I'm going, no you won't. I never asked it that way.
And when I asked for information as business as usual, and we've got a classic case
Mm-hmm.
on the go,
Yep.
I'd asked for information, oh, you're not entitled to get that because it's not in your ward. That was the first thing. And I emailed back to say, by the way, tough luck, regard this as a freedom of information request, and I got the information. Incidentally, a year later, another individual asked for the same information and was told we don't have it. To which, when I was copied into it, I said, oh, I've got it. Because I asked for the same information a year before. And that gives you the shenanigans that sometimes you've got to try, and we're learning as we go on with regard to that. The freedom of information is there, 20 days in which to get a response back. If you're not happy with it, it goes to review to Douglas
At least it
Henry,
causes them grief.
and
which
then
is
it goes to the Commissioner. But there should also be business as usual. If I put in a normal request for information, I should get a response back. It's the way you would run your business in an open and transparent way, and that's maybe the point.
What is Dick Walsh's agenda?
Power and control. I can't think of any other reason.
What's
Power.
his point?
He wants to be the master of the universe, I think.
He thinks he's got a monarchy in his hand.
He was walking along Guelph Street here, I thought he might have been in tonight. Dick, are you around there?
What's he trying to do? He's clearly not doing it for the people.
But people have known that for such a long time. He's been
So why
elected
does he
and
keep on getting
re-elected
back in
and
again?
re-elected and re-elected.
That's what I don't understand. Why do the people keep re-electing
It's
and
a
re-electing?
democratic process. And we're actually preaching to the converted here, you know what I mean?
Yes.
You know, so it's how we make the best of a bad deal, in a sense. That bad deal probably would be hitting us in any case because of what's happened in Westminster and the knock-on effect. So I think one of the ways forward would be certainly I'll go back to my group leader and as an SNP group, the openness and transparency thing is absolutely essential
It's
in this
non-existent
process.
at the moment, by the looks of it.
Well, there's
When even the
well,
other councillors are being restricted as to what yous are told and
Uh-huh.
what information yous can
and it's the
get.
control through the P&R committee
Is
as
that
well,
not,
which
is
is a bit.
this not what
well,
graft is? I mean, is that not? I mean, that's what it's beginning to. That's an American word for it, but you know what I mean. It's like conning the people out of their own money.
corruption, that's for
Yeah,
Gordon.
aye.
Could you maybe put forward
Sorry.
to your group as well that they have a look at an alternative budget?
Yeah, well that's what we're going to be looking at, because what we've also done is we've divided up into shadow councillors for each area, you know, so I'm doing culture, tourism and sport, believe it or not, sport. So I mean there's cost implications, you know, like running the sports centres, you know, what, and swimming pools, all this, that type of thing. So I'll be looking at the implications of budget cuts in those areas, and the other councillors that are involved in the group have other areas such as education, adult care, environmental services, planning, etc. Those are all, it's across the whole gambit of services that's been delivered, and we're going to be focusing on those specific areas. So hopefully we will be able to come up with an alternative. It might still be hurtful, the alternative,
Yeah,
you know, but at least it's an attempt rather than being dictated.
And on another tack, but alongside what you're proposing, we could pick up on Mike's suggestion that at relevant times on relevant issues, we get our act together and field some petitions. Now, they're not going to make changes, but it's only 2 years away from the council elections, and that's a good time to get the wind up folk who want to be re-elected.
It also causes a paper trail. Every petition causes a paper trail that the councillors and the council, the admin, can't deny. There's no way they can deny petition after petition
If we
after
can manage
petition.
good numbers, and that's up to us to make sure.
Uh-huh.
There's
Can I
just
put a
one
point
thing.
in?
Sorry,
just
Dave
gonna
was
say,
trying to
is
get
that
in
all
line
right?
and then you.
I was going to say that obviously this is a very interesting meeting. In fact, obviously we should have a lot more of them. But much of this is not generally understood by the people out there, and this is where we fail very badly. We really do have to let everybody know,
Yeah.
and we have to let everybody know all the time. And if we're going up for a local election 2 years from now, the object has to be to remove this lot from the very top. The Tower Castle was so very interesting. For the first time ever, some people in this community recognised the rogues that were running this council. Those of us who have known it for years know exactly how incompetent Argyll Butte is. But really, we really do have to somehow get us up into the media, but very much more strongly, and let people know.
There should be
Getting
some
people
kind of
interested in
framework
politics, there's a
for the
lot of people
public
that
to
can't
get
be
rid of
bothered
these
with it.
people.
Alan,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
Ellie's suggesting that we actually have a wee 5
Yeah,
minute,
we'll have a 5-minute break and everyone can
because
get
that
something
lady
to
went
drink,
out
'cause it's
feeling it's
kind
very
of warm
warm
in
up
here,
this
we'll
end of
open
the
the
room.
door up.
Alan,
Can I just say that we have to be extremely careful the wording we use. Argyll Butte is not entirely incompetent. There are parts of it that are incompetent,
Yep.
and we have criticised the administration who are regarded as being incompetent. There are many problems that there are with the council, however, and one of the things is that the leadership of the council has got a Praetorian guard of senior officers of the council who work exclusively for them, do not provide or cooperate with the other members of the council. To provide any alternative budget, you need these members to provide you with the detail of the budget and the detail of costs right down the line. To do it through the vehicle of petitions, it would be great in a situation where you didn't have to make cuts, because they are going to cost a fortune. They're going to tie up the employees of the council in answering your petition and digging in for detail. In the same way, as Dick Walsh tied up Argyle House in providing all the detail for the argument with the Castle Tower. Now, all I'm doing is saying that you may decide, or people may decide, that that is still the best way to go down. But you have to consider the cost of it. You have to consider the benefits of it. And there are maybe other ways that we can look at improving the performance of the council we can come on to at a later date or in the second half.
Is there any value in getting a draft or skeleton letter to Audit Scotland that we could all send out with our little bits, instead of doing it through them, complain to Audit Scotland that we're not getting information like that?
Well, we could, my suggestion here would be, let's see what the Chair of Audit and Performance Review and Scrutiny agree to do, or not, first. Because we should use the mechanisms within the council that are part of the democratic process first before we go to Audit Scotland. And I have to
How do
say,
you find that out? How, as the man on the street finds that out?
well, I'll
We're not gonna
publish
get
it once I
a
know.
law that tells us.
I will publish it once I know. That's all I can do.
Okay, good.
See the key point seems to be making, mind that we're keeping round and round. It's a very difficult issue, but it's the issue, like we're saying, trust and transparency, and them not wanting to, do things behind closed doors. Dick wants to control things, do things behind closed dours. Why isn't that the point of taking a position to just ask them the simple question that children often ask you? Why? Why do you do it behind closed doors?
I'm happy to do that. How many people are here tonight? And I can just simply say, at a meeting tonight in Dunoon of how many? 40 people.
50.
Well, we could make it more explicit, because I could simply say, if you're happy with that, that all of this budget debate should be done in public.
Yes.
And papers published and minutes printed.
Yes.
What's it all about? What's this?
I'm just wondering if you keep it
Good
quite
idea,
simple.
but all
If
we
you keep
need
it quite
is that.
simple. If you keep it quite simple, it's a difficult thing for him to defend. So the more you open it out, he'll just be able to run around and dodge behind this and that. If you just get him to explain what's his reason for keeping it quiet from us.
Yeah.
What's the benefit of him? Is it a benefit to him? Or is it a benefit? What's the point?
I'll certainly be
If
emailing.
children ask you questions, it's very difficult to answer them with just because that's what he's going to say to us. I don't think that people accept it then.
I'll certainly email the group leader tomorrow for SNP and chase up with exactly why the email came out with confidential against it, because actually we all know through going onto the website that the budget papers are there on the website from last year's budget, so you can access some of the information but not all of it, so we need to get that tidied up. We'll do our best to do that.
Right, well I'll do that to Dick Walsh, and I'll publish the email that I send him.
You're not going to be popular.
Yeah.
I'm not
Is this
popular
going to
at the
put you
moment.
in a really bad
No, it makes no odds.
make things awkward for you? And
No, couldn't care less.
right, well we just stop for a couple of minutes and everybody can get a
Appreciate
cup
it.
of tea and
I've drafted something. If anybody's unhappy with it, say so. This will just go to Councillor Walsh when I go home. It's very simple. Councillor Walsh, at a public meeting attended by over 40 people this evening in Dunoon to discuss the budget issues the council faces, there was a unanimous view that the whole service choices process should be conducted in public. The view was clear. The process has to be brought into the full council process of published papers, minutes being issued and meetings open to the public. Your secret and undemocratic process needs to stop. Will you agree, Councillor Walsh?
right.
Is that alright?
Will you let us know if he gives you an answer?
I'll publish it all. I'll publish it.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Will you try the Observer for that as well? You'll get that to the Observer, I assume.
Yes, it must go to the.
It might go to
Open letter to Walsh in the
tonight,
Observer.
Yeah, probably,
Okay.
yes.
Aye.
Well, it won't go in this week. It's too late now.
If the Observer don't put
Well,
it
you
in,
get it
you
tomorrow
might
morning.
well paying for an advert.
Wednesday morning we'll put it in.
Yes, we'll put it in Wednesday morning. Try. But
Try.
I think it would be well worthwhile paying for the advert if they won't put it into the news.
Right.
Yeah,
Might-
They
might
might,
get-
they
squads
might stop
out.
that as
But
well.
not in the over, but don't
Mrs. Carmichael
apparently over
thinks
time
Walsh
she's
is
a
a
real
great
character.
person.
At
Just
the Campbellton Crew.
Always trying to
Yeah.
go
maybe a
with
proposal for just one small amendment.
For the record.
And please don't think I'm feeling sorry for Dickon anyway, but instead of saying your secret this, that and the other, I would say the council's secret this, that and the other. I mean, rather than saying he's the only one, he's not.
He is, in fact.
Yeah, but
I mean, the truth of the matter is, he proposed this on this basis in the full knowledge, as I now know, that it would be kept away from the public.
but other
How long's
folks,
he been in charge?
30 years.
Wow.
But you know, there are other councillors who are supporting him and all the rest of it, then to just state that.
Yeah, but you
If-
can't, you,
It's just a little
what
bit
you're
of
saying
Okay.
is the councils, when you're talking about the council, you're also including Mike and
Yeah.
Gordon in the council. In the administration is who run the council.
Well, then say the
and
committees.
Walsh runs the
Then say
administration.
the committee.
Surely he's bouncing his head against the wall though, if,
Right.
if that
And
Walsh
if
is
you're going to send this to the papers and
deciding
media,
whatever's ever.
that's
Yeah.
all
Well,
I'm
I'll
thinking
say
of.
your administration's
Yeah.
secret
Don't
process
make
then.
it a,
Because one
Your
thing that you can't do at a
administration's
meeting
good.
like this is have a
Fine.
letter written by committee, so if we're happy with that, that takes the
Fine.
edge that you were wanting off
Your
it.
admit,
Man.
you know, your administration of
Yeah.
which you lead, you know.
Yeah, okay.
he's the
The
one
open
that-
times, Mike. We might as well all join up.
Well, it's too late for the Open Times, it's published on Thursday morning, so it's very unlikely to get yes.
What about the Buteman, the Arambana?
Go for all your
Campbellton
I'll
Crew?
fire it off to them anyway.
Fire off the wall.
I'll fire it off.
You got editor things.
Maybe that's what's needed, we all join up. I mean, this
And the-
meeting,
And the
we
radio.
talk to
I
somebody
thought it
on
was
the
next
meeting
year
open and-
we could vote for local councillors, Spies, Dick Walsh in for another 2 years.
2017.
No, it's
Parliament
2017.
next year.
That's 17.
Local authorities the following year.
which is just as well because you need 2 years
Absolutely.
2 years to,
Mhm.
to tackle it.
as we said.
Right.
as we discussed.
During James Robb's tenure at Maiden Council, was the issue of transparency as bad?
I don't think it was as bad, but
We're talking about getting rid of Walsh here. Who, you know,
I think that's what everybody's after, is transparency.
yeah,
As
I know.
clear as.
I know. There's a lot more that could be done, there's no doubt about that. I mean, apart from anything else, even councillors get papers to read and often only get maybe four working days. And some of the full council papers run to 700 pages. Now, that alone is a way of stopping people from digging into anything, because it just puts them off reading them.
And you end up actually just going to the
Administration
recommendations.
gets them well in
I
advance.
know.
That's a general
Because you
local government problem, not
I had one meeting one meeting in the morning, one in the afternoon, and I think in total was over 1,000 pages
Yeah.
to read,
Wow.
which I got a week before. And I'm being truthful, I didn't get through all of it.
I thought there was a law that had to be 2 weeks.
No, it's 7 days,
7
but the problem is that they issue them late on a Thursday for a Thursday meeting the next day, and if they're posted out to people, I mean, I read
Monday
them
morning.
electronically, but if you post them out, quite often they don't get them to the Monday or Tuesday. So,
It
one
would
of
be
the-
an idea to ask councillors and people in those positions to put things in layman's terms instead of using big words that some of the community don't understand.
I've been asking for the past 3 years to have the documents that are produced by the council to be done in plain English. Now, you can put your, I did this, I've experienced that myself in Renfrewshire Council. You put it in plain English, there's no reason for having the documentation using the jargon, whether it's road engineer jargon, whether it's accountants jargon, whether it's legal jargon. It can be done in plain English. And what you do is you have 1 or 2 staff in each of your departments who run their eye over whatever documents are produced and plain English it. And the only words that I know that there was a difficulty with plain English when I worked in Renfrewshire was the word tenement. Because in English, they didn't really have tenements. In Glasgow, you get thousands of tenements. That was one word. We know what a tenement is. It's not. So that was about the only handful of words that actually had any major issue with. So there's no reason, if we're open and transparent, it's also about people being able to understand what's going on in plain language. Plain English. I've asked for that for the past 3 years. Every opportunity I do get at council, I make that request. It's a bit like lampposts. Some of these things are recurring.
Is it not a fact that the council also, a lot of the money went into consultants?
Well,
and that was more or less money wasted,
where it
could
could
have
have
gone
gone
into.
well, yes. I mean, there has been a huge amount of money spent
And
on
that shouldn't
consultancy.
be-
You'd think after 30 years in power, they would know their job well enough to be able to do it without consulting anybody else. They don't consult the public, so why should they pay money for consultants that, given how long they've been in the job and doing it, why do they need to consult
But
people?
one of the problems is, I mean, there is probably a lot that could be improved on local government generally, not just like Ireland. Why do they ask all these consultancies? Because grant-giving bodies, as well as central government, wants this certainty that they're doing the right thing, and they want a consultancy report on everything, and they then go on to shelves and gather dust. It's not always the council's problem or fault. So
I'm sure there is an element of it here though.
From what I can work out, it just seems to be one man's idea, Nick Walsh. It's his idea of what he wants to do. It doesn't seem as though that he's listening to the man on the street or the man or the woman on the street. It seems as though he's not listening.
But that's
The
one
administration-
aspect of it.
The administration is made up of
That's
Lib
an
Dems,
important aspect.
Conservatives and Independents. And the SNP, when it went into the free fall 2 years ago, 1 year ago, one of the options was, and was put forward by a number of them who are in the administration now, but were, and left the SNP, was that we would go into a collusion with the Lib Dems, the Conservatives. Now, I'm just so glad that a number of us stuck to our guns and said we weren't doing it, because we look awfully silly now with Nicola Sturgeon saying we're not going into coalition with the Conservatives in Westminster, and my goodness, we could have been sitting in collusion with the Lib Dems in Argyll and Bute. So to me, that's the only saving grace in all of it.
But you think maybe, in a more general note, you need to understand that there's a lot of the councillors, and I need to be careful what I say here, but there's a lot of councillors don't read the papers. Some of them read precious little of them. There are some who don't turn up regularly. There are ones who turn up and sleep during meetings. At the Hoban and Lorne area committee last
Still
month,
get paid.
a very big decision was made, and a very poor decision, but a guy who had been sleeping all through the debate had to be woken up to vote in front of the public. This is not private information, it was in front of the public. We were completely shocked. And there are a significant number of councillors who don't give a damn. I mean, I can't get away with how little response you get from councillors. I've often said that you could write to them and say that a senior officer had decapitated another senior officer, and you might get one of them saying, "You sure that's right?" But the rest of them would just ignore it.
Is it the money they want?
I just don't know.
Better given when they weren't paid.
Do they have to, how many meetings do they have to turn up to? Do they have to, I mean, is it a bit like the House of Commons? If they don't turn up, they don't get paid?
There is a rule, I can't remember offhand what it is.
Is it in the public domain how many times they...
The code of conduct for
attend?
councillors would indicate, to be fair, for some councillors have been ill and and gone through treatments and things like that, and that's genuine, that's not. But for those,
their attendance
there are
is
a
in the
number
public
who
domain.
are
Yes,
are noticeable by their absence on a regular basis, and that's just. But again, the folk out there vote them in, so and after getting 45% at the referendum, I'm sometimes tempted to say hell mend them. Do you know what I mean? But we're in a new phase now, and things are moving on, and things will change.
At the last election in 2012, there was only one ward in Argyll and Bute, Ward 2, in Oban, where there was more than 50% of the electorate voted. Most of the rest of them were in the high 30s. So, you know, people have only got themselves to blame to some extent.
It's not a case of trying to get people interested now.
Absolutely.
Nobody seems to be interested in politics. I laugh it up. I watch Prime Minister's Question Time and all that. 'Cause I like it.
You're a radical. You know, you're a radical.
I don't know about
A communist!
I don't understand why people are not interested. Why they
I
don't.
think they are now. I mean, you wouldn't have got this group
Yeah.
coming out 4 years ago.
Like,
I wouldn't have
do you
thought.
mean they've only got themselves to blame when you say that? Or you mean by who they actually get to represent them?
Yeah.
Well, to an extent, because the people are voted in.
But not enough people
And
stand.
it is a relatively fair
interested,
voting
you just-
system now in local government.
There's not enough people stand in opposition.
Yeah, but that's catch 22. When you ask them why they don't stand it, join that bunch of numpties? No, thank you. I mean, you can't win.
I still like to tell the story. It must have been about April, I think, of May. The election was in May 12th. When I was walking down Argyll Street from the car park, walking past what was the old BS shop, and I got to the lights to stop, and I heard the voice from the diagonally opposite corner going, "Oi, you!" And I turned round and looked, and Jimmy English is outside the pub, leaning on the railings. Listen, so I crossed over. I says, "What do you want?" He says, "You have your head." He says, "Are you standing for the council?" And I mean, he said, "You're a bampot," and he more or less walked inside the pub and left. But that was Jimmy's experience of a relatively short period as being a councillor. He couldn't hack it, and I have to say, it's no fun.
You know, just say many times have we driven down, and we do, you know, we very often, and Mike is all, I regard him as my chauffeur. I mean, he's got a lovely car, and he was up and down the road, so it's a real bonus getting driven up and down the road in luxury. But in the same token, many's the time we've come down the road, and really by the time you leave the council having experienced a 2 or 3 or a 4 hour meeting, and you say, what is this all about? You know, actually, by the time you get to Stracar, all the way down, you get to Embray, you're ready to resign. But by the time you get to Stracar, you think, no, because that's exactly what
They won't
the
want
game
it.
is, you know.
You know, the thing is, you know, you've got to ask yourself, we elected in Argyll and Bute an SNP group, SNP man at the top. So who do you elect then? Who do you elect? You're saying folk aren't turning out, you get what you deserve. Folk turn out. Who did they vote for?
That was a bit of a bluff, I think, the last
No,
the last
a lot of us are aware
election,
of
and it was the
what
biggest disappointment in my life, and probably in Mikey's as well, that we had an SNP administration, and it went belly up.
Yes.
But you've got 3 years on, I can see how it all happened,
Yeah.
the game that's played.
And
We
it was-
stuck up for the old folk in Struan Lodge. That was I wasn't elected to shut down care homes on the whim when you find out they're paying £2 for a pint of milk. You know, and we sat at meetings where we were hearing things that actually 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years before some resolution to it could have been done, but management or the council or whoever it is within the organisation did damn all about it. So you end up with trying to defend buying the milk, a pint of milk for £2 through a procurement scheme. You know, where's the common sense in that? So we were naive. I was naive as a councillor.
Yeah, I was
Naive,
too.
big time. But just have a wee look at who's on the council, who started off in the SNP and where are they now? And that proves to me they were not SNP.
God, I
to the
don't think
heart,
anybody's appointing
you know.
fingers at either you or Gordon. I'm certainly not doing that.
No,
Um,
I'm saying, but it's a disappointment.
Yes.
And that's where, and it goes for Westminster as well as Holyrood, as well as the council. Who we are voting in, we can turn around in 5 years or 4 years' time say, well, you've not done the job right, you're getting out. That's the democracy bit of it. And that's something that we've got to make sure we really make sure that whoever's voted in is aware of that. You've got to vote this time. You might not get it the next time, and that applies to me, that applies to Mike, that applies to everybody going into Holyrood next year, and it applies to them at Westminster. That's the democracy that I think is really important. We need to get out there. But we're all elected people are representatives. If you don't want us there, you vote us out. I mean, that's it. most,
I
to be
think-
fair, most are doing their best. Do you know what I mean? Most, I think, are genuine
It's the bad apples. and the
kind of
bad
folk. It's just
The head-
power corrupts
I'd
everything.
like to
Yeah.
ask, I'd like to ask Mike,
Well, Ken, on you go, because
right, on you go, my friend.
You hit the nail on the head. It's a representative democracy. The trouble is, our representatives are not allowed to represent us because they're whipped through the lobbies. And as soon as you all have one man, one vote in Parliament, in councils, and nobody is allowed to dictate how you vote, we'll have a democracy. But we
No.
don't have one at the
I
moment.
disagree completely with
Yeah,
that
you don't
because
have
if
a
you look at the
democracy.
history of Argyll and Bute, the ones that
Exactly.
who are able to jump from one to the other, you've got to have some sort of group discipline and a general. That's my experience, and Mike might disagree right, at this point in time.
Why?
But
Ask me
because
the Ked's question. Why do you have to group this?
well, we've put a mission statement out. We've said what our
You're
parameters
a
are.
party. We don't want parties. We want individuals.
No, look what happened. They
That's where
jumped.
your
You
trouble
waved some
lies.
money in front of their
You've got
nose, and they would sell their
independence at
granny.
the moment.
Argyll has a
Same as
history
Granny.
of independent councillors
And
since
it was-
time
And it
immemorial.
was well run.
None of them had a lot of good.
They
Absolutely.
would jump from one.
Well
We
run
wouldn't
then.
be in this situation.
They would jump from one to the other.
Actually, piggybacking on that
You're
idea
going back to the
of
old days.
representative democracy and other options and what else is out there and what's available. On June 6th in Oban at the high school, there's a meeting taking place throughout the day. It's called the People's Council, looking at a viable alternative to how Argyll and Bute functions. And that's on June 6th in Oban, 9:30. You can go online, look up the People's Council and join that. I think it may still be free for some folk, but they're asking for a tenner. I think it's well worthwhile going up there and having a look at that. There is a second process that you can go through, which is Dunoon Community Council's holding its AGM next month. We need community councillors.
Yep.
Yeah.
We don't have enough. And if you want to ask questions of Dick Walsh or Mike, when they're there, you can join up as a community councillor. There's a third tier you can get involved with, and that's community planning partnerships. They are going to have more powers and duties within the Community Empowerment Bill, and our secretary, Willie Lynch, has now just been elected as the chair of the Community Planning Partnership. Now, you have to be an organised group to do that, but you can self-represent up there and say, I want to be admitted, and they can't stop you if you're a constituted group. There's lots of ways to get involved. Seriously, if you want to get in there and get active, then we can stop moaning and be active, get in there and stand up to the plate. And take issues like this on at the community council level, at the community planning partnership levels, and figure out how we can change democracy within Argyll and Bute. These things are happening.
Well said, Willie.
Yes,
Alice, I think that what Willie Lynch though, it's a very good position that we've got him into now with the area community planning group chair. But you're right about the community councils. Community councils are underused.
Yes.
They're a statutory part of local government.
Yeah.
And
They're
we
ignored.
don't. Well,
One of the reasons I resigned.
I know
was,
that, Ken. I know that, Ken. But that's what we need to try and change.
Yeah.
Most people work 9 to 5, can they go to Oban?
Can I just say
On
that
a day.
Sandbank Community Council, if they don't get more members in it, it's going to be a none, and then Village Hall will go and
So when's that?
Tonight.
I do believe it's
Tonight.
next week
Community
sometime.
council meeting tonight.
Oh, is it
The,
tonight?
the next one is
No, it's tonight.
Yes,
Come on,
that's-
won't you get on the bike?
Everybody in their cars, let's go.
Okay, well, I mean, we could go on all evening here, but I suggest that we kind of draw this up and finish it at 9 o'clock. But I think, you know, this starts to apply some pressure. And listen to what Alistair said. If you can come to Oban on it's a Saturday, please be there. If you can be at Dunoon Community Council, come in. It's the second Monday
of the month.
of the month.
And Dunoon.
And it's
Castle
in,
Tower DGA.
it's in Struan Lodge.
And this, there's the South Kild Community Development Group are having an AGM at, is it the 28th of May or 28th of June?
But that's only for members though.
No, the public's welcome.
Yes,
You just
I'm
can't
welcome,
vote.
yeah.
But we are welcome to be there to figure out, to see what's happening with Castle Tower, and which has sparked a lot of this process off for a lot of
That's
people.
right.
Yeah.
You know, stick that open things at 9:30 in the morning.
It starts at 9:30 in the morning.
What time
Les,
is it on till?
it's on till about 4 or
4
5.
o'clock.
And the process of that is to create a people's charter that people can sign up to and say, this is how we want government to run. Leslie Riddoff's going to be speaking, Robin McAlpin from Commonweal,
Cat Boyd.
Cat Boyd, Vivian Dance is there, and Mike Russell. So there's a good, but they're going to try and flesh out. But I hope they can look at participative democracy, which it would involve something like this, rather than having a representative form. But that's a deeper debate.
It would be great if we could get some of the liveliness that everybody was infected with during the referendum to filter down through the layers of politics to our own local politics. And you never know, I mean, it might happen.
Can I make a suggestion for the Oban thing? There's enough folk here, we all seem to be in agreement. Why don't we hire a coach?
Yeah,
I'm up for
that's
that.
a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm up for that.
Could I just say that you'll already be aware of the Boundary Commission consultations which are about to come out.
That's right.
Now that's going to possibly come into effect from 2017, which will result in a reduction in 36 councillors down to 33 councillors within Argyll and Bute. It's already been, although it's discussed as a private item, it's already out in the
Will that come
public
into
domain.
power before the elections or after?
Yes.
That will be before the election. So that at that point, that's when you need to start thinking about area committees and what the composition is of the area committee structure. So there is an opportunity really in 2 years' time for the council to look at the area committee setup, and that's maybe something that maybe various community groups throughout Argyll and Bute and in Argyll Street, Dunoon, to maybe put their minds to see what kind of structure, and that's part of the overall thing that Alice
Mike,
is
who the other two are going to get defrocked.
But actually, the Boundary Commission have made these proposals specifically to get rid of Councillor Blair. It's quite clear.
Well, I can't make comment on that.
They're going to split the Cow Ward 3 ways between Bute, Mid-Argyll and Helensburgh. Believe it or not, I mean it's the most utterly outrageous proposal. So if you look at the map, the right hand side from Ardentinny south will be part of Helensburgh, the middle bit will be part of Mid-Argyll, and West Kyle will be part of Bute.
Talk about coming in.
Whose idea was that?
That's ridiculous.
Boundary Commission.
Are we allowed to budget, or are we allowed to?
It will go out to a formal public consultation fairly soon.
It shows a total disregard or unknowledge, I should say, of Argyll.
Somebody's drawing lines and maps to get the population numbers right.
Is Westminster not doing the same thing? They're trying to change the boundaries. Are they making them smaller? Are they making them larger?
Well, they are, but I'm not really that interested in Westminster, to be honest. We've got enough problems here locally. Yeah, I know. Okay.
Is
Carol.
Dick Walsh resigning?
Who knows?
It's just a rumour.
You need to remember though that if the rumour is that he's not going to stand again, that makes him more dangerous for 2 years.
Absolutely,
That has
exactly
been
what
the rumour. Every election has been resigned to him.
I know that. That's true. That's true, Alan, actually, for several
Sorry,
years.
Alan,
Never.
what did you say?
He said he's never been leader again, too, at the last time.
Maybe those
Anyway. Right. Well, I'm going to try and keep publishing stuff at least once a week on my blog and try and keep people up to date. But when I write to Dick Walsh, I will immediately put it on the web, so it's there for people to see, and I'll publish his reply.
Can we have bullet point bits from your blog on the window?
Well, the window in the shop, we agreed at the last committee meeting that once the election was over, we need to be careful in here about the planning consent for this building. It's retail, so our enemies will very quickly find issues with that. So what we agreed was that we would split the two windows, and one of the windows would be purely for retail stuff. So we've asked the Greens, the Commonweal, the SNP for kind of goods that they would like us to retail on their behalf, and the other one will be to make a political point.
Good shout.
So that people walking past aren't bombarded, but they get a message and they see it's still retail. Because we have to be very careful.
We've got a sandwich board as well that we've just painted, and we're going to use that and put messages on it.
Be careful, because the council has been very.
They'll watch you.
They'll
Oh.
probably say, charge you for the book.
I mean, it would be so easy for them then to turn you out.
I know.
You put it on someone and walk up and do a girl's suit.
Would you do that? Thank you very much, Sandy. There's nothing like getting a volunteer. Brilliant. Right, are we okay? We call it a day at that?
Yep.
That was good. That was good.
I think we'd all like to thank Mike
Thank you very
very
much.
much.
No, thank Haley. She started it.